Hello, this is Barrett. Today I'll be talking about the essays of The Good Immigrant and some of the connections, symbolism, and significance of these, as well as connections to work which we've read in this class. Specifically, the essays which I will cover are Summer by Nicole Dennis Bren, After Migration, The Once and Future Kings by Wale Oyehide, Luck of the Irish by Maeve Higgins, Your Father's Country by Andrew Chi, and Dispatches from the Language Wars by Daniel Jose Elder. So I must admit, before having read these essays, I did believe a single story. I was under the impression, for whatever reason, that immigrant struggles consisted almost exclusively of parents who did not speak English and academic pressure. But when I read these stories, I saw struggles of sexuality, defining manhood, and wicked grandparents. And it really made me think that I was not looking at them as the whole person. I was looking at them as this role which I believed they played. So while there is no uniformity between these immigrants, I still did find sort of three impactful themes within these essays. These include the general freedom of the writers to choose for themselves, acceptance, and racism. So in terms of freedom to choose, the first essay which covers this topic is Summer by Nicole Dennis Bren. And she basically says that being an immigrant means you do not have the freedom to choose. You have to choose what is necessary. The American dream is about independence, and so she chose to be a doctor because this is what would bring about the money and the success and the status necessary to be independent and create a new life for your future and your children's future. When she brings up wanting to do creative writing, she's quickly shot down because there are other people, meaning other immigrants, who would want her spot and would be pre-medicine as she is. And so that means she has to, or at least that's the way she feels. The next story which covers this is After Migration by Wale Oyehide. And he actually mentions that disappointing your ancestors is worse than death. An example of this disappointment would be being a stay-at-home dad or a fashion designer such as he is. Later in this topic, I'll cover this in terms of acceptance. His Yoruba mother says that if he's not going to be a doctor, then what was this all for? She's referring to all that she sacrificed and all of the bravery that it's took for her, but now there's this burden on him where he cannot even define his own life. He can't even make his own decisions. She says mothers don't emigrate so that their sons can be homemakers. And now onto the topic of acceptance, as I sort of mentioned. Now, this includes the struggle for accepting your culture as well as being accepted by your culture. So the first of these, there's really two stories that especially exemplify it. The first one is Language Wars by Daniel Jose Elder. He is a second-generation Hispanic immigrant who allows xenophobia to make him reject his language, which is Spanish. He accepts the bigotry he hears as true, instead of pushing back against it and embracing his culture. But we see a transformation of him within the story from not accepting his culture at all to immersing himself in the language, and it is through this language which he finds himself a part of this culture. He sees beauty in the language, and beyond the actual contents of his essay, we see him describing the translations and the art form, which is the language, for multiple pages, and I think there's symbolism in that alone, that he is finding this beauty in it, and he is finding himself in the culture through the language, and he eventually comes to the conclusion that cultures live on through languages. The next essay, which spoke on the topic of an immigrant accepting their culture, is Your Father's Country, and this is because this author accepted South Korea as the complex country that it is, with its complex political past and even turmoil. He finds meaning in the scene that he's looking at out of his hotel room when he goes there to interview a movie producer, and he's picturing it as a movie, and so he's creating this story for it, and basically the story is kind of covering the political turmoil in the past of this country, and he finds that once he's learned that, he is able to accept it. And there's also the included in here the process of being accepted by that country. His father immigrated from South Korea, and his father's family is not great. Usually they kind of feel like if he is to be accepted by South Korean culture, that would entail them owning them. But he eventually makes friends with other Korean Americans within South Korea. And this allows him to feel as though he's being accepted through the relationships he's built. Another one, which covers acceptance, is Swimmer by Dennis Bren. And a clear example of this is her not being accepted by her friends for not wanting to achieve what I'll call tangible excellence or tangible success. When she even brings up wanting to switch to English and creative writing, they ask, well, then what are you doing here? And it kind of brings to mind that their love for them is very conditional upon the basis that she is pursuing the same metrics of excellence that they are, because that's what they feel is your duty as an immigrant. But the two people in this story, a literature professor, as well as her eventual wife, see her as the whole person. And this is a really important message to think about, seeing immigrants as the entire person they are and not just as a role they fill, or even if they've seen great, tangible success, that is not the whole story to them. They are also a human being. And so then the last one, which covers acceptance, is After Migration by Wale Oyehide. And it is more so in terms of being accepted for your role. Being a stay-at-home dad is not what many Western African cultures would consider to be a strong man. But times have changed, and so should people, so should your roles. Parents, they say, used to fear colonizers, now they fear their kids talking back to them. So long, manhood had been synonymous with hard work, and success had been synonymous with achieving tangible success. But what really is success? He kind of goes on a tangent where he says it's success basically hating your life for a job that sounds interesting at a dinner party, or success pushing your daughter on a swing. And so this is a really interesting thing, and it's a struggle for many immigrants to try to redefine success for themselves, not just for their parents or their culture. The last topic which I will cover is racism. And the first one which speaks on this is once again After Migration. And this is really more so on the basis of representation. There's a lack of positive and fair representation of Africans in media. And many of them are depicted in a story where it's a Westerner struggling against the savage wilderness of Africa, and maybe depicted as savage people. But then he eventually, gets the girl and leaves. Whereas a movie like Black Panther, which this author was actually part of the making of, the representation is much more positive and will have much more positive effect on these kids, because the African is the hero and they are smart and they are the story. The next article or essay which I'll cover, and this is the last one, and it covers racism, is Luck of the Irish. This one I haven't mentioned yet because it is so different from the other stories, and I really thought it was interesting for that reason. Because for this immigrant, it was actually quite easy coming to the U.S. They had pre-clearance, which makes it really easy for Western European countries to get to the U.S., but also harder for Black and brown countries, as they described it. Asylum seekers don't have pre-clearance. This author was never afraid of overstaying. They had no fear of having their papers or being caught by anyone because of this actual support group they had of other illegal Irish immigrants. And even when there has been policies which have targeted brown immigrants, they have never really touched Western European immigrants. And this reminded me of The New Passport Poor, which mentions the storyline of Casablanca. And it is sort of the reality that staying in America is different based on the color of your skin. So thank you. That is all I have to say for you.